The latest picture of the housing market leaves some mixed signals for real estate investors. While sales of new homes surged in April by the biggest amount in 14 years, the median price of a new home dropped by the largest amount on record to $229,100. That is an 11% decline from previous months. So what is going on here, and when can we expect the worst of the nation's housing slump to end? We're happy to be joined right now by Seth Weinstein. He is the president and founder of Hannah Real Estate Investors. Seth, thanks for joining us.
Hey, good morning, Rob. It's nice to be with you on this beautiful spring morning in New York.
It is spectacular indeed for Memorial Day weekend to get started here. Well, let's look at these numbers and make some sense of this. We've got some numbers that seem to be positive, some that are clearly negative. Is this a housing slump?
Well, I've been calling it a soft landing. We had 5 years of increasing prices, and what happens in a cycle like that, there's just too much building. So you particularly see in markets like Florida, California, Nevada, Arizona, where huge tracts of housing were built, lots of condominiums constructed. Too much building for the market. You've got a short-term oversupply. Prices have to fall, and they are starting to fall. At the beginning of a cycle like this, developers and owners of existing housing stock kind of hold their prices as long as they can. And once the prices come down, product starts to move, and that's what you're seeing happening.
So, Seth, for somebody who's thinking about selling a home right now, what advice would you give them? Should they wait it out a bit longer if they can, or look for some signs that the market's starting to bounce back?
Well, I think that if you're going to sell or if you're going to buy, the right time is now. There's not a big drop in prices. You're talking about a few percentage points really overall in most marketplaces, particularly on existing housing sales. If you look at the numbers objectively over a longer haul, 6.4 million units of existing housing stock selling on an average annual basis, almost 1 million units of new housing. I think the exact figure was 981,000 on an annual basis. Those are big numbers.
Yeah.
And so if you look at it objectively, it's a good time to buy, it's a good time to sell. If you're a seller, you've got to price your house appropriately, dress it up nicely, stage it, make it look as best as you can, and you move your product.
All right. Well, no bad news for anyone there. Let's move on, Seth, to a topic that I know you're very involved in. I'm very interested in this: inclusionary housing practices. What is inclusionary housing?
Well, Rob, one of the things as we've gone up in prices, particularly in the new urban economy, in the urban areas that have been successful, prices have gone up, and we've seen these temporary downward fluctuations, but over a long haul, prices have gone up quite dramatically. And what's happening is middle class and working families are getting priced out of urban marketplaces. So cities particularly are struggling with how do you provide housing for working families within the urban context and not force them out. And of course, in order to have a thriving economy, you've got to have people of all types living in the city. If you take a city like New York, if there's no place for firemen, policemen, hotel workers to live, you've got a real problem in terms of maintaining a growing economy. So finding affordable housing is critically important. And one of the trends is to include affordable units in new housing construction so that you've got a mix of housing types. It's not quite the old 80-20 concept of the 60s and 70s, but it's a new trend that I think will help a lot in providing working families with places to live in an urban environment.
So, Seth, when you mix in, let's say it's 20%, just to pick a number, of affordable housing units in a development that is 80% market rate housing units, how does that impact the value of the market value units? A lot of people think, well, I don't want to live in a mixed development because it's going to keep my real estate values down for some reason. Is that actually the case?
Well, we're building a lot of mixed housing in Stamford, Connecticut, for example, up in the Connecticut market. I've got 5 major projects, about $350 million worth of product going up right now. And we're finding that the inclusion of affordable units does not negatively impact the sale of the market rate units. And I think it's actually very healthy for both the market rate folks and the affordable folks to live together. We're talking about working families here, policemen, firemen, school teachers, nurses, and those kinds of people are nice to have in a building. And I think that what we're finding is that mix is good for both sides of the equation and has not hurt our pricing on market units. And I think it's just good social policy.
Yeah.
You know, we built a lot of economically segregated and racially segregated housing in the 60s and 70s in the United States. The model doesn't work. Having people live together is really what we should be doing in this country.
It certainly makes sense. I mean, being a New Yorker and watching the way that the city has developed over the years, we are getting closer and closer to a point at which only very well-off people can live on the island of Manhattan, and those who are, whether it's nurses or administrative assistants or people who we all need and interact with on a daily basis, all have to be coming in from, you know, further and further away from the city center, and you know that does create an issue for labor, and also just socially it creates an issue, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think in New York, as an example, Mayor Bloomberg is really struggling with this issue in terms of how to provide housing that's affordable for working families within the city context. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed is working in a city like Stanford, which has been very progressive. The mayor up there, the zoning board, the Board of Representatives have really worked closely together to provide a policy and a framework. And so I know it's possible to do this in a very challenged economic situation to provide affordable housing. So I'm very optimistic about the ability of the country to deal with the problem, but it's an issue that has to be grappled with, and there's a lot of creative solutions out there, and I'm proud to be participating in them.
Seth, what about developers? You obviously are a developer who believes in this and is doing this, but most developers obviously are looking to maximize their profit. So what benefit is it for them to offer any affordable housing in a development where they know they could get a lot more money for whatever percentage of units that you might say they should set aside for affordable housing?
Well, there's a couple of ways to incentivize developers. In Stanford, for example, it's a blanket policy. So if you want to build in that market, and it actually is a pretty good market right now, you've got to do one of three things. Include affordability in your project, pay money into a city fund to build affordable housing elsewhere, or build affordable units separate from your market project. I always choose to include the units because I think it's just better social policy. But other developers have made other choices. Therefore, I think what has to happen is the cities around the country have to develop policies to incent or force developers, kind of a carrot and stick approach, to get them to do this. You can do it with tax abatements. You can do it with bonus zoning. In other words, if you will include 10 or 15% affordable units, we'll let you build another 15 or 20% of your building. In other words, make it larger. So it's a package of incentives and a package of dissuasions, let's say, that'll get developers to do these things. And I think it's worthwhile to tackle. I know the mayor of New York is working on a national basis to try to come up with some policies that'll work. We've been very successful in suburban Connecticut to put policies in place that are building a lot of affordable units, Rob.
All right, Seth. Well, nice talking to you today. Very interesting topic. Congratulations on the work you're doing, and good luck.
Thanks a lot, Rob. It's always a pleasure to be with you guys at ABC.